Hi, y'all. Welcome to the GradMissions Office Hours podcast. I'm Autumn.
Hey everyone, I'm Lisanne.
Hi, I'm Logan. All right, we have spent the last week or so discussing a topic. Uh, we've referred to it as the artist formerly known as the diversity statement, also known as the perspective statement, also known as the other impactful experiences in the med space. We've been talking about what is, from a strategy standpoint, what is the best use for this text box? We tried to kind of organize our thoughts a little bit. Hopefully, we're going to lead you through it in kind of a how or a what, who, why, how order to kind of keep us on track. I don't know if you've listened before, but we're known to wander off in other directions. So, no
Squirrel.
promises. Yeah, squirrel. No promises. But, Autumn, if you want to talk a little bit about what is the perspective statement from a law and a med standpoint?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, it used to be called the diversity statement. And so it was a very blatant space where someone who came from, a marginalized background, who had a different socioeconomic status than most people applying to med and law school, who had a different sexual orientation, who had been in foster care, who was a Syrian refugee, like whatever your hurdles, that you had experienced, that's where you would put it. And it was sort of also internally referred to as the scholarship essay. Because if your personal statement is the essay that gets you admitted, then the diversity statement was the essay that signaled to scholarship committees the different things that might give you a scholarship. So there's been a lot of shifting in admissions. And so it sort of has a different name, which then sort of changed the nature of this text box. So it is now called the perspective statement. Law schools will call it 17 different things because that's how law schools are. Sometimes they'll call it your unique lens, what do you add to the tapestry of our class? They ask it in a lot of different ways. Some law schools don't ask for it at all. They'll just say you can submit an optional essay and then you can interpret it as being your perspective statement. For med school, it is the other impactful experience. And it is just really a space to talk about what makes your path to med or law school different. And that's really it. So if you get on Google and you look up, what are the majority of law students, what are the things that most law students look like, or what are the things that most med students look like, and you think about what in your life makes you a little bit different. And that's really the best, if you're not a political science major applying to law school, that could be something you write about in your perspective statement. Write about your anthropology major, write about your opera major. If you're applying to med school and you're not a biology major, oh my gosh, amazing. Talk to me about, your computer science or your even biomedical engineering is a little more rare these days. So I think that is what it is. Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. And sometimes too, law schools will ask it in the supplemental essays
Yes.
too. That's another way to look for it. A lot of law schools now are shifting to the supplemental essay prompts, and that could be a place to talk about this.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, it's disguised in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
I have even, this may be controversial, I've even seen people use this as part of their YX law school. Like, why do you want to go to this law school? Maybe there's, a student organization that aligns with something that's unique about your lived experience. Maybe there's a clinic, maybe there's a
Yeah.
professor who has written about this. That's really, if you want to get really creative, that's another space that we could write about this.
Could it also be kind
Absolutely.
of, how you interpret the world? Like
Mm.
your individual viewpoint? Is that another use case for this essay?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So, for instance, we had a client in the past who grew up with a brother who had a lot of special needs. And so she herself didn't have special needs, but she grew up as the sibling of one, as someone who had that, and just the way that shifted her family dynamic. And she wants to go into big law. Like, she doesn't want to work in like disability advocacy. But in her perspective statement, she wrote about that unique lens. And she's been working as a legal assistant for a few years in big law. And she was like, honestly, like me learning how to care for and advocate for my brother made me a
Yeah.
better legal assistant because when I
Yeah.
had a client coming in with a lot of trauma, boy, I just like layered in that family therapy that we had done and it just and I thought her
Yeah.
perspective statement was so beautiful.
I think that's a really good segue into who is this essay for? Because it is optional, correct? It is an optional essay.
No,
Yeah, okay, I was going to
no,
say
I mean,
not.
technically, yes. Let me just give you this little tidbit about med school. So, about 65% of our clients come to us after an unsuccessful cycle. And, our work is a post-mortem on what went wrong last cycle. A lot of times their MCATs where it needs to be, their GPAs where it needs to be, letters look great, but where they really falter is really thin writing. And in 94% of these failed admission cycle folk from med school, they completely skipped the other impactful experience. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
So is it starred that you have to fill out that text box to hit submit on your AMCAS app? No. But do you want to repeat your admission cycle for 1325 characters? I would say no. It's not optional. And the same with law, right? Like
Yeah,
it's just
for sure.
it really is the who is it for? I would say the perspective statement and the other impactful experience are mostly for the admissions team, the admissions committee, and the interview committee. Because if you are a person who falls into an underrepresented minority group, that information is redacted from the application. This is new. So people applying to law school 2 to 3 years ago, it was not redacted. It is now completely blacked out. Law schools will not know any of this identifying information about you if you don't disclose it. And that matters. And we can get sweaty and talk about all the reasons, but I'm going to avoid that. But here's the real outcome of being blinded to those things. There are many, many, many scholarship dollars available to students who come from specific lived experiences and who identify in certain spaces. And those scholarship dollars cannot be offered if we don't have the data on the admissions side to prove that the student is eligible for the scholarship. And so, if you are a student who identifies in one of these spaces that there are traditionally scholarships for, and you don't disclose that somewhere in your prospective statement, you will probably still get a scholarship because you're so smart. But those scholarship dollars that come to you are going to be from the general population pool of money. And so it actually impacts the whole class because then these admissions officers have less money to spend on Gen Pop and they just leave these scholarship dollars that are so, carefully offered to the schools. Schools can't change it. Like this is in the bylaws. This is how the donor has given money. We cannot give it out. And I don't know. Like I feel like I'm being political, but I'm really trying not to be. What do you think?
So, yeah. Okay, I feel like there are some straightforward identities that we're reading between the lines on, right? Race and ethnicity, that would be a clear
Yep.
place
Tribal
to
tribal affiliation if you're a native person.
first generation. Um, let's see, obvious hardships,
Mhm.
Yes.
throughout life. Those are some clear use cases for this.
That's right.
And, plug for GradMissions, of course. Autumn and the team would help you write a really rich, detailed, account of your story
For sure.
for this text box. But how about, okay, let's take me, right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
I am, uh, well, let's pretend I'm younger. um, but I am a, white woman from an upper middle class family, uh, have led a very privileged life.
Mhm.
Would you recommend that I use this text box? And if so, what's my perspective? Because I feel like it is a perspective statement.
Uh-huh.
Privilege doesn't mean that you don't have perspective,
Oh, that's
right?
right. That's right.
And I think intentional reflection is what creates perspective.
That's right.
Do we
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? I mean,
Yeah.
is, knowing not everything about my life, but
Right.
basic white girl who likes a pumpkin spice latte, you know? What are
What
your
was your
thoughts?
major, Logan?
My major was sociology.
Okay.
I
All
have a
right.
master's in counseling. We can pretend I'm mid 20s.
Mid 20s. Are you applying to med or law school?
Let's say I'm applying to med school.
Okay. So automatically, your perspective statement should talk about sociology and
For
your
sure.
background in
Because it's not a
counseling,
typical.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're not a biology major.
Yeah.
And so I think really talking about the unique lens, I love zooming in on a specific element of your major, maybe a
Yeah.
project, maybe a capstone, maybe a professor, like something that you learned that you feel like can apply to not just your time in med school, but your life as a physician.
Yeah.
What unique lens does that give you? How does it impact patient care? How does it impact patient outcomes? Because you come to medicine with this unique lens. And that's what I would write about.
Okay, I'm inspired. That was
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
Um,
Leslie, let's do yours for law school. What would you write your perspective statement about?
Okay.
Because wait, give our audience a little
First gen.
background on who you are, Lady.
Sure. Yes. 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 So I'm first gen for sure. I was a special education major, and I spent a lot of time volunteering in high school and in college um, with people with exceptional needs, and also overseas in some really war-torn areas.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you're applying to law
Are you there?
school? Yep. You're applying to law school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So then
Let's
I think
start
you're
this all over again. Let's.
all over.
How can we? Yeah.
I won't make you retake the LSAT, Lisanne. I did talk to her about that early
Okay.
on, but
Please don't.
she decided not to. Um, so your perspective statement would be that, right? Like your unique advocacy voice that you have honed over years of
Yeah.
working with people with exceptional needs and not just them, but their families, because I know you. And when
Yeah.
you're working with them, you're also working with their families. And how that, even if you don't want to go into disability law, whatever sector of law you want to go into, you bring this sense of when there's a pause, you know how to check for whether or not that client understands what's happening. You know how to differentiate um, and do maybe present what they're reading in a different way if you feel like the client doesn't quite understand what's happening. You can restate things. There's an element of classroom management. I think about your unique um, sort of perspective when it comes to even things like picking a jury, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that interconnected sort of interpersonal skill that you've honed is really unique. And in the first gen segment, I would also definitely write about, drop that in there somewhere that you're first
Yeah.
generation.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
well, thank you. Yeah. I
okay,
wish
I
I could.
mean,
I always joke. I wish I could go back and do it again, minus the LSAT, and see
Yes.
what happened. But
Yes.
yeah.
I feel like if Autumn can write, or propose an idea for me, Lisanne went to law school. Like Lisanne is a lawyer, so she has
Surprise.
a logical set of lead up to that. I do not have a logical set of lead up to medical school. I have said many times that I admire everyone who goes to med school, and I'm so glad that we have doctors. I should not be one of them. Um, okay, so I feel like we made a really good point about you have a unique perspective.
Mhm.
This is your
Yeah.
place to share it.
Mhm.
In terms of why it's important, you touched on the scholarship aspect of it. This is a place for you to share aspects about yourself to maximize your scholarship dollars. I feel like another important reason to use this text box is that law and med admissions committees are building communities of people,
Yep.
Yes.
and they want to know that you can contribute thoughtfully in a group, you can respect people's differences.
Yep.
And this is a place, if you haven't had the opportunity anywhere else in your application, to let them know that you can be a citizen of that community. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a citizenship essay
Absolutely.
for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, and not like US citizenship, but just like you're a good neighbor.
Yep.
And, you know, we can talk about the personal statement in another episode, but the job of the personal statement is your why law. It's your why medicine. The job of the perspective statement or the other impactful experience is to be why me without being pick me or poor me,
Yep.
right? If I had to put it on a billboard, that's what I would say. So the why me, the pedagogy of law school is the Socratic method. And so we are trying to build tapestries of classes who can work their way in a 360-degree view of whatever legal concept we're discussing in class. If everyone who is sitting in that 1L class went to a private school, slept on the frat house couch for the past 4 years, is going to slap a cap on their curly hair and stumble across the street to law school. They already have their first year summer lined out because it's the same practice that their dad and their grandpa are at, and they're all alumni. If everybody is Chad in that class, you are not going to get a fully exceptional legal education because you need those people in the class who have actually signed a contract before, someone who's bought a house, someone who's maybe had some legal trouble themselves, someone who comes from a lower socioeconomic space, someone who comes from a higher socioeconomic space. Like you're all working together to learn the law, as like hokey as that sounds. And I'm sure the same is true for medicine. You mentioned in last week's episode that the science faction finds the non-science faction and they buddy up and bring different perspectives. So you are trying to show what thread you bring to that tapestry.
Really quickly, it reminded me, non-traditional students. This is a great time to talk about that because a lot of the non-traditional students that we speak with are a little self-conscious that they aren't the Chad that rolled across and went straight to, and I went straight to law school. And I looked up to the people who were non-traditional because they had it together. You know, they were real adults.
Yep.
And also, when we worked on the admissions side, obviously, those students just stood out so much because they knew what they wanted, and it was a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice for them to go back to school. And so, being able to talk about that in this space, I think, would be really beneficial. Where a lot of people will shy away from that, like, well, I didn't
I'm
make the
worried
choice
about
right away. It's like,
ageism.
so what? Yes, yes. Or I don't, I've been working in finance for 15 years. I don't have any legal experience. I'm like, it doesn't matter. This is better. This is better. So that just reminded me to kind of talk about that too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Seems like if grades and test scores are being used by admissions committees to try to predict academic success, maybe this paragraph essay is kind of being used to predict professionalism.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
Professionalism, grit,
employment,
right? It's good. Employment. Yes. All of those things. And it's really important. The other thing I will say, we had a client last cycle who was hesitant to really talk about his faith in his perspective statement because he worried that the more secular law schools would look down on that. And I really pushed him on it. And not that like you need to make your application like an evangelical platform to try to save the souls of the admissions committee. Please hear me say that it's not the right space. But if your faith is a part of your core values, it's a part of your driving force to go to med school, to go to law school, you can write about it if that's something that's important to you. And I think the framing around it needs to be just that, right? Like I have a higher calling and like it really is a calling for me and this is what drives me and I want to, leave things better than I found them and, restore hope and bring whatever is the reason that your faith is a part of that. And if you're worried about a school being offended by that, then probably that's not the school for you anyway. Do you really want to spend 3 years somewhere where your faith isn't, if your faith is huge for you, I'm not saying you necessarily have to go to a school that has the same faith as you, but you at least need to go somewhere. Maybe they have a student org, maybe they all go to mass together, whatever that looks like. The more you uniquely show up as yourself in your essay, the better fit of a law or med school is going to connect with that application and bring you in.
Absolutely.
Hey, good content. Okay, so let's sum us up a little bit.
Okay.
Before we close up shop here, let's leave our listeners with just some quick and dirty tips on how to make the most of this section if you are writing it.
Yep. If you're writing about your race or your ethnicity and you're applying to a school that is public or private that potentially has leadership that doesn't want to acknowledge those things, I would definitely mention race and ethnicity at least in paragraph 2 or in sentence 4 or 5 of other impactful experience. Just a little bit of burying, just so that it doesn't get redacted. That's just things that we're hearing. If you are writing about your lived experience, make sure that you are writing from a healed place, that this doesn't turn into a trauma dump. I think you need to make sure that you've processed. What we say here is we want you to write from scars, not from scabs. So if you're going to bleed all over the page, maybe have someone who doesn't really love you that much read it and be like, this is too much. Like you're saying it too much. You want to talk more about the lessons you learned than the actual things that happened.
Perfect. Lysanne, anything else that you want to add here at the end?
No, we've covered it all. And come work with us and we'll help you.
That's right.
Because
Sometimes
these
it's
can
a
be hard things.
conversation.
Yeah. And these can be things that are hard to talk about. And it's, you may be coming from a place that you want to talk about it, but you're not exactly sure how to. That's most people.
How personal is too personal? That's what people ask a lot.
Exactly. But they're important things to talk about. Don't shy away from talking about it and talk with us about how to put your story out there in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and turn the lights off in the podcast loft, but our lights are always on our socials. Follow us at GradMissions, TikTok, Instagram. Have a great week.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye.